Hey there. So, on to the Apothecary again. When we left Pip, Benjamin, and Janie, they had just turned themselves invisible and were running down the street to keep warm towards the bunker, the fortified set of buildings underneath a large swath of London. So, my question to you as we embark on chapter 20 is, what surprises you? And you're probably like, what do you mean? Well, you can be one of those uber cool people and say, nothing surprised me, everything I expected. You're probably not being honest with yourself, so let's work on that. What surprises you? What comes out differently than you would have anticipated? What discoveries do Pip, Janie, and Benjamin make that we couldn't quite have anticipated? And leading into the next question I have here, because I couldn't resist to this time, sorry. What do we know about Mr. Danby? And it's important to notice that he is evolving. He is not a stagnant character. He's not a flat character. He doesn't stay like this, me. He's more of a round character in that we see him evolving a little bit. He started out as this very gregarious person, friendly, warm, caring, and now we're seeing some different things about him, okay? And as I say that, you can also always be analyzing Benjamin, Pip, and Janie, but I want to kind of help you see all the characters in our text, all right? So what surprises you, and what do we know about Mr. Danby? Chapter 20, the bunker. We ran invisible through the streets of London, dodging people in warm hats, scarves, and woolen greatcoats, who couldn't see us and would have walked right into us. Benjamin was right about running, warming us up. By the time we got to the bunker, I was out of breath, but I wasn't cold anymore. Pip's ear went straight to the lock on the bunker's door, and his paperclip looked like a tiny worm wiggling in the air as he worked. Benjamin and I kept an eye out for passers-by. "Oh, come on now," Pip said to the lock. "Right, there it is." The door swung open and his ear went inside. I bumped into Benjamin's bare shoulder as we tried to go through at the same time. "Sorry," we both said. "Shh," Pip said. Inside the door there was a small room with an elevator, but instead of a button to call the car, there was a place to insert a key. "Can you pick that?" Benjamin asked. "I don't know," Pip said. "It's a switch for the lift." As he said it, we heard the elevator cables running, and we stepped back. I held my visible pinky behind my back, not sure if that would do any good. Then I pressed it against the wall, so at least it wasn't floating. The door opened, and Mr. Danby came out with a young man who looked puzzled. "Stand outside and watch for birds?" the young man asked. "3 small ones, all together," Danby said. "One is a red-chested American robin. Captain Harrison thinks he saw a cat attacking them. I don't understand why he didn't report it right away." "I'm sorry, sir, but I don't think I would have reported a thing like that either." "That's why you're only a lieutenant," Danby snapped. I felt Pip's hand grab mine, and he pulled me around the 2 men toward the open elevator door. The 3 of us tiptoed silently into the car. "So if I see 3 birds, I call you?" the young man said. "Try to capture them first," Danby said. The lieutenant, who wasn't in uniform, I guess because of the bunker's secrecy, went unhappily outside. It was clear that he thought Danby had lost his mind. Danby turned a key in the switch and got back into the elevator with us, glancing up at the upper corners of the car. He was looking for birds, I suppose. The doors closed and we started to sink down under the ground. Below ground, the elevator opened onto a small room in which a row of orange hard hats hung over brown canvas jumpsuits on hooks. Heavy boots were tucked neatly under a bench along the wall. Danby went out of the room into a hallway and turned right. We followed him, padding barefoot past framed pictures of Queen Elizabeth, Princess Margaret, and Winston Churchill. Then abruptly, Danby stopped and turned around, as if he'd sensed someone behind him. I tucked my visible pinky behind a picture frame and held my breath. He scanned the hallway. Another man leaned out of a doorway and called, "Danby, if you please." "Yes, General," Danby said, giving the hallway one last searching look. We followed him into the general's office, where he sat down. The general had gray hair and an air of authority, but like the others, he wore no military uniform. There was a map of the world on the wall with thumbtacks stuck in it. There were a few blue tacks in what seemed to be New Mexico, and a few red ones in Russia. There was a blue one stuck in an island in the Pacific, and a white one off the coast of Australia. "Any luck with the prisoner?" the general asked. "Not yet, sir," Danby said. "The mutinous should wear off soon." "Did you try getting written answers?" "With no success, sir." "I heard you questioning Captain Harrison about birds." Danby flushed crimson. "Yes, sir." "Something to do with your investigation of the apothecary and his doings?" "Yes, sir." "I'm sure you have your reasons, Danby, but the men are starting to talk." "But they—" Danby began, and then he seemed to think better of it. "Of course, sir." "Just so you know, you're one of our best men, and I don't want you compromised." "Thank you, sir." "And your East German contact, what does he report?" "That the apothecary isn't working for the Soviets, sir. Also, that Leonid Shishkin, an accountant at the Soviet embassy, has been serving as a messenger, but seems to be working on his own, out of personal conviction. He isn't running the network." "I see." "We know that the Soviets are looking for the apothecary. They expect the conspirators to gather soon, and they believe Leonid Shishkin might lead them to the group. But as it stands, I don't think the group can proceed without the apothecary." "No?" "No, sir. He's their Oppenheimer, if you will." "I was pretty sure Oppenheimer was the physicist who'd made the atomic bomb. I tried to look at Benjamin to see what he made of the comparison, and realized that the strangest thing about being invisible wasn't being naked in a military bunker. It was that we couldn't make eye contact. There was no way of sharing all the information I had grown used to sharing with him in a glance. I didn't know where Benjamin's eyes were, and he couldn't see mine. So for me, as I'm a reader, I would probably jot the word Oppenheimer, or the person named Oppenheimer, because I know this book flips between fact and fantasy, and I'd look to see if there was an Oppenheimer associated with the atomic bomb and look it up, because that's how you gain more information and more insight to references in books. And the more you understand the subtle references to pop culture or history, the more engaging it is for you to read the story. The general raised an eyebrow. "I see." He looked at his watch. "Do you suppose the silent treatment might be ending yet?" "I'll go check, sir," Danby said. Rising, he seemed anxious to be out of the office. "Danby," the general said. "Yes, sir." "You're sure your Kraut is entirely on our side?" "Yes, sir," Danby said. "And he's quite ruthless." The general smiled to himself. "Good," he said. "Wish we could bring him in here to do some interrogating. We could use some of that ruthlessness." Danby smiled uncomfortably. "And do we know who killed the poor old gardener?" the general asked. "Not yet, sir," Danby said, "but we'll find out." I knew that he knew the scar had done it, and thought what a very good liar he was. He sounded completely convincing. "Strange business, that," the general said. "Well, carry on." "Yes, sir." We followed Danby out and tiptoed behind him down the hallway. When I think now about how much eavesdropping we did, I realize that being 14 had prepared us for it. To be a kid is to be invisible and to listen, and to interpret things that aren't necessarily meant for you to hear, because how else do you find out about the world? That is a quote that, if again I had my reading journal, I would totally write that down and explain what I think about it, which I think it's very apt. Children do have to listen and kind of figure stuff out sometimes, and people say stuff around them, not thinking they'll hear it or understand it or find it interesting. I'm going to read it to you again and make you think about, if you wrote it down, what would you say about it? I realized that being 14 had prepared us for it, i.e. eavesdropping. To be a kid is to be invisible and to listen and to interpret things that aren't necessarily meant for you to hear. Because how else do you find out about the world? We passed an enormous telephone switchboard with empty chairs waiting for operators to sit and make connections, and I wondered if the switchboard was meant to run all the calls of London in the case of an atomic bomb, and if there would be anyone left to make calls. Farther down the hall, Danby knocked at a door. A young woman in a neat green dress came out and closed the door behind her. She had wavy light brown hair, cut short around her ears. "So?" Danby asked her. "I'm so bored," the girl complained. "I thought that stuff was meant to wear off, but we're just sitting there staring at each other." "I think you'd like that," Danby said. "You could talk all day with no one to interrupt you." The girl pouted. "It's no joke," she said. "I need a coffee." "Go on then," Danby said. The girl flashed him a grateful smile and darted off down the hall. Danby went into the room, and we silently followed in, ready to rescue Benjamin's father. Somehow, I was so busy finding a place to stand where I couldn't bump into Danby or anyone else that when I finally looked up at the prisoner, I was shocked. It wasn't the apothecary. The prisoner was a woman, and she looked Chinese. She was young, maybe in her 20s, with her hair in a shiny black braid, and she wore a black shirt and black trousers. I could have sworn that she looked at my visible finger, but only for an instant, and then she fixed her eyes on Mr. Danby. She was beautiful, in an austere way, and angry. She sat straight-backed in a chair at a metal table that was bolted to the floor. Danby took a seat on the table with one foot on the floor, affecting a casual stance. "Would you like a coffee?" he asked her, "or tea?" The prisoner shook her head. He asked her something in a language I guessed was Chinese, and the woman gave him a look of contempt. "My Mandarin's rotten, I know," Danby said, "but I'm curious. The muteness didn't last this long as Shishkin. Perhaps it's because you are so much smaller." The woman shrugged. "The things you wrote for me in such elegant Chinese calligraphy. I had them translated," he said, tapping his knuckles on the table. "Some of the curses were rather primitive. The one about dogs and pigs, for example. But some were rather good. I liked the one insulting my ancestors to the 18th generation." The woman glared at him. He reached forward and put a hand on her pale throat, as if he were a doctor examining it. "It's been suggested that I hurt you to make you talk," he said. "It isn't my way, but I am under a great deal of pressure." He pressed his fingers and thumb into the soft recesses of her neck in a way that seemed both very expert and very painful. The woman's eyes watered and she blinked, but she said nothing. I couldn't believe I had ever found Danby dreamy. Now his handsomeness only made him more horrible. He dropped his hand. "Amazing how long the pill has lasted," he said. "But it's only a matter of time before it wears off. I'll be back." He left the room, and we heard the door lock behind him. The prisoner's manner immediately changed, and she coughed and put a hand on her throat, then turned to where I was standing. "Why are you here?" she demanded hoarsely. Pip already had his unfolded paperclip out and was working on the lock. "You can talk?" Benjamin said. "Of course I talk." "Do you know my father, Marcus Burroughs?" The woman paused as if unsure whether to trust us, then nodded. "Where is he?" "We don't know," Benjamin said. "We thought he was in here." "You're the chemist?" I said, remembering Shishkin's note and the gardener. I wondered if they had known she was a woman. "You're Jin Low?" "How long have you been able to talk?" Benjamin asked her. Boys and girls, I wonder if they had known she was a woman, referring to her as a scientist. And remember that this story is placed in like the 1950s, I believe is what they said. So then most women stayed at home with their children. The division between men's work and women's work was still a lot more prominent. and women were often rejected from different careers. So it was rare for a woman to work through all that bias and get to a position of power in a field like science or technology. Thank goodness things are changing. How long have you been able to talk? Benjamin asked her. Whole time. They think I have pills, so I pretend. Can you make yourself invisible? I asked. It was a long shot, but she was a chemist. It seemed worth asking. She shook her head, her braids snaking on her shoulder. The door's unlocked, Pip announced. Jin Low frowned. This is not a trap? You think it's the kind of trap the British military is likely to lay on, Benjamin said. 3 invisible kids? We just need some way of hiding you, I said. Jin Low seemed to consider the problem, then untucked her shirt and removed several tiny glass vials from the sewn-up fold of the shirt's hem, pressing them out of the slot in the fabric one at a time. She chose 2 and stuffed the others in her pocket. One of the vials contained something orange and one was a clear liquid. Smoke flare, she said, to signal plane. We'll fill all of bunker. She poured the clear liquid into the orange vial, sealed it with her thumb, and shook it up. When she took her thumb away, a thick orange smoke started to pour out of the vial. In a few seconds, it had filled the room. I held my breath so I wouldn't cough. Open door, she said, and Pip did. There was no guard in the hall when we looked out, just Queen Elizabeth and Princess Margaret and Winston Churchill gazing at us from the wall. Jin Low held up the vial, and the orange smoke filled the hall, obscuring the pictures. I'd never seen so much smoke pour out of such a small container. It surrounded us as we stared silently down the corridor. We were almost to the telephone switchboard with the smoke billowing out behind us when Pip whispered, "Look!" He held out his arm, and I saw him do it because there was a dusting of orange on his invisible skin. I could see his head, too, as if cast in orange mist. The smoke was clinging to us, and we were becoming visible as orange ghosts. I looked down at myself and saw my hands and forearms nearly transparent but outlined in smoke dust. I crossed my arms over my naked chest. The dusting had started at the top where the smoke was thickest. I could see Benjamin's head and shoulders too. "We have to get clothes," I whispered. We were outside the general's office where we'd heard Danby talking, and I peeked in. No one was inside. A long black wool overcoat was hanging by the door, and I grabbed it and put it on. It was enormous, but I didn't care. There were voices back down the hall beyond the smoke screen. "Look at this smoke," the girl who'd gone for a coffee said. "Is it a fire?" a man's voice asked. We ran silently toward the elevators, the smoke billowing behind us. Benjamin grabbed a jacket off one of the switchboard chairs and pulled it on just as his legs became orangely visible. An alarm rang out, making me jump. There was coughing and shouting in the obscured hall behind us. We reached the elevator lobby, and Pip pressed the call button. It didn't seem to require a key to go up. I grabbed 2 khaki jumpsuits and 2 hard hats off the hooks on the wall. Jin Low was still waving the vial in the hall, spreading smoke. "Take this," I said, handing her one of the jumpsuits, "and put your braid up under the hard hat. Pip, you take the other." She started pulling the jumpsuit on over her clothes. "You look like the Invisible Man," Benjamin said to me, looking at my long coat. "Well, you look like the Invisible Girl," I said. The jacket he had stolen was actually a woman's light blue raincoat, cinched at the waist with a full skirt. Pip, still naked and half visible, was busy brushing the orange dust off his skin. "It comes off," he said. His arms had vanished again. "Brush it off and take those stupid coats off. Quick!" We scrubbed ourselves clean as quickly as we could. The orange dust came off easily, and handed our clothes to Jin Low as the elevator opened. She still wielded the smoke-spewing vial in one hand. I heard a shriek from the female guard down the hall. "The prisoner's gone!" she cried. But the elevator doors closed, and we were on our way out. Boys and girls, I hope you enjoyed that. And again, what surprises you? And now, what do we know about Mr. Danby? Hope you enjoyed today's story. Can't wait to share some more later. Take it easy. Bye.